So our annual theme is Living Everyday Wonder. In March, we're focused on play. And I gotta tell you, it's more than a little challenging to try to come up with a talk about play while so much of what's happening on planet Earth feels like anything but playful. And infinite intelligence does its thing every time. So the themes that we work with through Centers for Spiritual Living are actually set in motion more than a year ago. And today's talk title is Playing Twister with God. Now that fits into what's happening, right? And so I actually looked up the history of the game Twister. And like everything else, it's very, very interesting. It was actually the brainchild of a child, right? In 1964, this kid imagined a game where people were the players instead of little plastic things. And it was initially called King Footsie. And failed miserably. But a divine idea in the mind of God will be manifest. And so in 1966, it came through as Twister, a refinement on King Footsie. And as far as I know, it still exists today. But it didn't exist and it doesn't exist without controversy. I find it prophetic that it was originally marketed with adults on the box. And here was the selling line: the game that ties you up in knots. I think that's called life. Is it not? We're playing a game that oftentimes ties us up in knots. And what just came through was, it's our knots that tie us up. Right? It's, we get, life ties us up in KNOTS. Because of our NOTS. It's our knots that create our problems. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to let you do this. I'm not going to entertain this idea. I'm not going to let you entertain your idea. Which makes us all a bunch of not rights. Quite honestly. What if we didn't have any right or wrong? Now, I am not. Let me be really clear, because I can hear the keyboards already going. I can hear your fingers tapping. I am not saying in this physical realm there is no such thing as egregious behavior against other human beings, the environment, animals, all of that. There is. If you want a science of mind litmus test for that, you can find it on page 270 of the Science of Mind, a Philosophy of Faith, a Way of Life. Does what I do bring more joy, more peace, more happiness to myself, and at the same time harm no one? If it does, it's right. If it doesn't, it's wrong. It's right there. We do have a definition of right and wrong. Many of us think we don't. We do. Right? We're fully human, living in a human realm. So this game called Twister, right? It has this mat. Some of you know what the mat looks like. Right? The head nods are people in my age group. Some of you may not. It is just a plastic mat with colored circles on it. And the objective is to have a hand and a foot on whatever the spinner tells you, whatever color the spinner tells you to put your hand and foot without falling down. It doesn't mean without colliding with someone else, right? And as you know, the spinner is kind of like this thing called life, because we're all empowered with choice, but other people are making choices too. It's not just your choices. You're not even really in control of the spinner as much as we think we are. What we are in control of is what we choose once the spinner lands on a color. Right? Because there's more than one red spot, there's more than one green spot, there's more than one blue spot. Now, typically, maybe you're different than me, I'm going to go for the closest blue spot. But that may not be available, because somebody else might already be on the blue spot, and one of the rules of Twister is only one person can occupy a spot. Right? So I may have to stretch to get to my spot. I may have to be uncomfortable to get to my spot. I may have to use muscles that I didn't even know I have and contort myself in a way that is unfamiliar to get to my spot. Anybody relating to this as your life unfolds? We're always playing Twister with the universe. What makes it fun is if we become aware of it, if we lean into it, if we embrace it and stop resisting. We're back to our knots. The game that ties us up in knots reveals them. Right? I'm not going there. Anybody ever said that? I know you think that's a good idea, but I'm not going there. Anybody ever said that to that divine call within their soul? Where we sit in contemplation and meditation and we're asking to be guided. We're asking for that divine download, and then we get it. And we're like, hello, God. Do you have a supervisor I can speak with? I'm not going there. Right? If you're a Bible-based individual, you know about Jonah. I'm not going. I'm not going to Nineveh. I don't care what you say, I'm not going. He went. He chose, he could have chosen all kinds of vehicles, but it was his journey to take. And so as the story goes, he wound up journeying in the belly of a whale. Now that metaphorically means all kinds of things. Okay? Because biologically, my understanding, a whale can swallow nothing bigger than a softball. So the chances that it's a literal story, slim to none. But the metaphor is, if it's yours, you're going to go. In 12-step recovery, we have a saying, you can go kicking and screaming or you can go singing and dancing, but you're going to go. Because that's what life is unfolding as you. As you. And that's the thing I think we miss. Is that life is not doing something to us. It's doing everything as us. And that is glorious and amazing just as soon as we get our knots out of the way. And if I'm operating from my knots, it's a path of drudgery and pain. If all I have to do to participate in the collective consciousness of healing humanity is pay higher gas prices so that the Ukrainian people can be free, I'll pay. I'll pay. I don't care what the price of gas is. if I have to be uncomfortable while I watch the news to inform my prayer work, I'll be uncomfortable. Because it's about recognizing that we are all in this twister game together. It's very easy to sit on my couch in Nevada City and convince myself that what is happening in Ukraine doesn't involve me. And that would be a lie. Because in oneness, there's no place outside of one. I could convince myself that the action of Governor Abbott in the state of Texas, asking his attorney general to ferret out all of the laws against child abuse and relate them to doing treatment for transgender adolescents in order to obliterate treatment for transgender adolescents in the state of Texas is none of my business. And you can excuse my involvement in that as, well, it's only your business because you're a transgender man. Neither of those is accurate. Neither of those is accurate. What happens to one happens to all. In the game of Twister, when the dial spins and everybody's going for the red spot, everybody collides. When one person bumps, everybody gets bumped. This morning I was watching a short special on glass beaches and the magnificent jewelry that comes out of our trash that the ocean has transformed for us. Right? It happens by friction. Transformation happens by friction. When I got here this morning, there was frost on the steps and on the ramp. Now, normally, I would just get the de-icer and toss it on there. And for whatever reason this morning, this idea came of just sweep it off. Now, my brain was like, it's ice. How do you sweep off ice? But the lesson in it, which helped inform this talk, was friction, melted. It was just a thin layer of frost. There wasn't even any ice. And the more friction I created, the more quickly it cleared. And so perhaps, and I will leave us with this, that our journey is leaning into the twister. It's leaning into the conflict. It's leaning into the friction so that we more quickly get polished. Because the more quickly we get polished, the more beautiful we become, the more visible we become to one another. That glass that's washing up on the beach doesn't have the sharp edges anymore. It won't cut you anymore. And so I invite you, lean into the friction that will polish your sharp edges. Lean into the friction that will remove your ability to cut one another. Make yourself more beautiful. And as you do, you will see everybody else as more beautiful, because that's how this works. Let's take this into prayer. I recognize there is only one, infinite, ever-present allness. That it is all there is. That I am in its presence, that its presence was here as this building when I entered. It was the outside that I entered from. It is expressing as me and everyone in this building. It is the technology that allows us to live stream. It is everyone watching and everyone not watching. It is every expression in form, every idea, every spin of the wheel, every contortion, the divine expressing itself. And I know that it is one whole, complete, perfect process. And so I speak my word, remembering, claiming, affirming, taking dominion over this thing called my power of choice. The power of choice within each and every one of us. The release, the choice to release all of the knots, to lean into the conflict of the game, to lean into the privilege to contort ourselves to learn, the privilege of conflict, the privilege of friction, the privilege of polish. So grateful. So grateful to know how all of this works and at the same time have no need or desire to control it, but simply to know it, to be it, to manifest it, to be the highest expression of divinity that I came here to be. I celebrate that for each and every one of us. And knowing that it is complete, knowing that the word spoken is the word fulfilled, I let it go. I let it be. And I invite you to join me in anchoring this word together as we say, and so it is.